was able to take a look.
All right, we're hoping for a couple of board members to show up, and if they show up in the next couple of minutes, good. And if not, then we have a quorum. Here we go. Tanya, good to see you. You're muted.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello.
You did the same thing. Well, unusual weather we're having.
Yeah, it was nice today.
For once.
Warm.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, so we've got everybody but Terry, I think. So we'll wait about another minute, see if Terry shows up, and if not, then we'll carry on. I texted him.
Did he respond to you, David, or should we just
Let's see.
move on?
Anything came
Join
back?
us later.
Did you get the text message that I sent? It was supposed to go to both of you. So if you got it.
I did receive it, yes.
Okay, so that means it went out. All right, so fine. Let's get started. It's Laser, are we on?
Hold on, Steve.
Okay. Welcome to the Greenburgh Central School District Audit Committee meeting. It's February 24th at 6:03 p.m. This meeting is now convened. Hey, Terry, good to see you. Let's all introduce ourselves. Lisa?
Lisa Raymond, Assistant Superintendent for Business.
I'm David Warner, Board of Education. Laser?
Laser Alert, Network Administrator.
Steve? Amy?
Amy Ashley Moore, District Treasurer.
Michael?
Michael Owens, new committee member.
Chris?
Chris Lazari, new committee member.
Tanya?
Tanya Dragic, trustee.
Terry?
Terry Williams, trustee. Apologies for being late.
We're good. Okay, so briefly, our tasks for this evening are to adopt some meeting minutes from the previous meetings, review the independent audit management letter and mostly the corrective action plan. And we need to look at that, recommend any changes, and then forward that on to the board for approval. And then review the status of last year's internal audit and plan what we're going to do about this coming year's internal audit. So along those lines, the first order of business is to look at the minutes of the last couple of meetings so we can kind of get caught up. And I'm going to try and do some screen sharing, and you guys tell me if this works. Let's see, let's try this. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. These are the audit committee meeting minutes from December 7th. And in this set of minutes, this is back before Christmas. We introduced this was, I guess, our first meeting post-COVID. We elected me as chair for the remainder of this year. We discussed membership issues. the charter, which had been, I guess, not really used since 2011, resurfaced. I think Terry found it, and we worked on conforming to that and making some changes to that. Scott Oling and Melissa Zott of O'Connor Davies, who are our independent or external auditors, talked about various financial statements, and we had, I guess I think Tanya, you bowed out of that because you felt like the committee wasn't complete yet, and then we went ahead and looked at them, and then you came back in, and then we talked about what we needed to do to get ourselves up to a quorum, and that's the review of the charter and what we would do since we're supposed to update the charter every year. We went through and said, well, what do we want to do? We've got this thing that says there should be 3 board members and 1 non-board member. And really that you end up with an even number of people, and it's better if there are 5 people than 4, because then you have a quorum of 3 and you're less likely to have a tie. So we kind of came up with that and went off and recommended that to the board. And that's kind of what happened in that meeting. Does anybody have anything they want to change about these minutes? Okay, do I
I'm
hear
good with them,
a
Dave.
motion? Say again? Did it look okay?
I said, yeah, I said, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Do I hear a motion to adopt these minutes as presented?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Abstentions? Good. 12-7 is taken care of. So, TD, TW, second. All right, second set of minutes. Let's see. Back out of this. Audit committee minutes for 125. So January 25th, we had come back from the board, and we now knew that we were going to have 2 people, and so that was the meeting in which we pretty much just interviewed candidates, right? So we entered closed session to discuss the employment history of candidates. People came in. I think there were 6 people. We thanked them all for their willingness to serve, and we were really surprised and pleased that we have a much richer skill set in the district that's willing to serve than we even knew. And then we came out and we had discussed this, and we chose Michael Owens and Chris Lazari, who have shown up for this meeting tonight, and recommended to the Board of Education that they be the new members. Of course, following this, we took that to the board and they approved. So here we are. Is there anything in this set of minutes that needs to be corrected or added to?
Looks good to me, David.
Do I hear a motion to adopt this set of minutes as the minutes of the 125-21 meeting?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Done. TD. Okay, making good progress. On to reviewing the independent audit management letter and corrective action plan. So the independent auditor, we had the main statement. We had a clean audit, so there were no huge deficiencies that would cause us a terrible problem, and so we took the main set of reports to the board. They approved them. They go to the state. The state says, great. In addition to the large set of reports, there's also a management letter. So if you've got minor issues, and there's always a list of minor issues, then those go in the management letter. And if you have a management letter, which you're not required to have one, but if you have one, then we have to come back with a corrective action plan for anything that's in that. So we'll briefly look at the management letter as a whole, and then we'll go back to what our response is to their recommendations and see if we're happy with what our response is. So the first document is the final Greenburgh Central School District Management Letter. It's dated December 14th. You may have seen that I put the December 7th version up earlier, and it took us a while to get the latest up, but this is the final one. And I think what happens is I think the list on the 7th was slightly longer, and there's some back and forth between our side and the auditor's side. And if you can't say, no, we really have the documentation for this, then stuff stays in the list. And if you do prove your case, then the item gets knocked off. And so at the point of December 14th, this is where it finalized, and this is what we had to respond to. So briefly, what is it, like 44 pages? Okay, so we'll scroll through this, and if you have questions about it, then we'll pause and look at those questions. You'll see a lot of references to those charged with governance, TCWG. And basically, there's a lot of boilerplate that says, what are our responsibilities? What do you expect us to do? What are we going to do? Here in the table of contents, the status of the audit and required communications and other matters. Then you get to the internal control issues. And that's where you get down to the nitty gritty and the things that we had to respond to. So we'll just kind of page through this a little bit. Okay. Audit field work is complete. Financial statements have been reviewed. We've issued the unmodified report. Okay. Here's all the stuff about, what our responsibility is and what their responsibilities are and how they will, in good faith, provide it. We have to provide them with documentation, and they have to give us a response if they see anything. They can't, they have to tell us. They have to do their job basically, and the primary audience for this is us, because it's an internal. Yeah, excuse me. Okay. Here we go. And then they define what a deficiency is, a material weakness, and a significant deficiency. And they say, we did not identify any deficiencies in internal control that we can consider as material weaknesses. So there's nothing big, okay? So they told us that, and then we get into control deficiencies, and this is the list. And at this point, I believe Lisa has pretty much gone through, copied this material out, and put in our responses to each of these items. So at this point, I'm going to skip over to the other document so that we can look at that, and I'll let Lisa narrate her way through it. You're up for that, Lisa?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so corrective action plan. There we go. Okay.
Okay, thank you,
Take
David.
it away.
So as David said, every year, if there are any control deficiencies, we need to write a letter to the trustees that will, once it's approved at a board meeting, approved by the audit committee, approved by the board, it goes up to the Office of the State Comptroller so that they can review it along with our audit report. So the first deficiency was old receivable balances. So at December 31st, we had a little more than $1 million that was still outstanding for the district to be collected. That, I believe, after doing some research with Amy and some ladies in the business office, we found that because of the pandemic, because of agencies being closed, revenue wasn't being released from the state, the federal government, or other governments as fast as it has been in the past. When I came in December, after we looked at everything, we did find that our accounts receivable and due from other governments has all been received. Those basically were monies for health and welfare billing and for tuition billing that we do to other schools and other agencies. One large one that we always bill to is New York City, and they always aren't as timely in paying as other school districts, but they have since paid. The state and federal aid receivable are for some of our grants that we received, and some are still outstanding. We had some reports that we had to file, which we did. We got them done. They're complete. They're in. They have been acknowledged by the state education department that they have been received, and they're under review. So we will be collecting this money. We have some of it in, not all of it, but I'm assured that we will be getting the money. So in the corrective action plan, I indicated that we were researching the outstanding balances, and anything that was outstanding or that was due will be looked into, and any outside agency will be contacted for payment. In the future, barring the pandemic, and now that we can work remotely if we had to, we will make sure that the state and federal grants that we have will be accessible now that we have access to our computers from home or our network at the school. All of that work could be done at home, so those reports will be done timely.
Okay. Any
Okay.
questions on that particular item?
Just a quick question. What is the typical receivables balance? And I don't know if we have the stats here, but what is the recoverable rate like typically?
I believe that it is, it's not, I don't believe it's as big as the $1 million, but it could be as big as at least $500,000. Because you have to remember that our federal grants, they are on a different year than schools. Schools go from July to June. The federal grants end in August. So there's always going to be a receivable for those. And like I said, for the health and welfare and the tuition billing, New York City is never timely. So there will always be something for that, as well as any sales tax that we need to collect. We collect from Westchester, but we do that on a quarterly basis. And again, when the school year ends, we haven't collected at least June. So we book that as a receivable.
Now, are we being asked by the auditors to book the receivable, even though we know it's not really likely to come in by 6:30?
Well, what we do is we do book them, and when the auditors come in, they will look and see what has been in the past, what is more than a year old, and then they will ask us how confident are we that we will collect those funds. So I can tell you, for example, there is one district that we had been in argument or not in agreement with for over a year. That was written off because it doesn't seem like we're going to receive those monies. Our attorneys were involved, their attorneys were involved, and that was just written off because it was a timing difference and a deadline difference that they say we didn't meet. So we will constantly be looking at that, and anything again that is over a year, as long as we can prove that we are confident that we will collect it, the auditors will let us keep that on for at least another year. If in the second year it is not collected, then they will tell us we need to write it off. In future years, if we were ever to collect that, then that would come in as miscellaneous income.
So then are we going to end up in some cases with a resolution for the Board of Education to accept the write-off?
I don't believe that is brought to the board. We just write it off. If
Okay.
if it's large and it affects the revenues, then yes, I would bring it to your attention. But this one that was written off prior to me was not large. So we just got it off the books to clean everything up.
Okay. Other questions? Okay.
So David, I do have a question.
Yeah.
So what can we do, Lisa and or Ashley Amy, excuse me. I do that a lot, I'm sorry. To ensure that we collect this money in a more timely fashion.
So what we do is there are different people in the business office that are designated to do different billings. Okay. So for example, the health and welfare and the tuition billing, that has to be done during a certain period of time. We have to wait for rates to come out before we can bill other school districts for students. And a spreadsheet is kept on those. And as the money comes in, the spreadsheet is updated that's been received. If it gets to be a couple months old or at the end of the year, then that person follows up with the district to find out, do you have it on your radar? Do you have it in your books to be paid? And, inquire, when could we expect it? As far as the federal and state grants are concerned, we can consult the website, the SCD website, and gives us an update where it is at in the process. So for example, right now, we have applied for the CARES money, which is the pandemic relief money for this school year. That has all been filed. If you go on the SED website, you'll see that it is acknowledged that they received it. It is under review, and every school has a designated representative that if we had any questions or inquiries, like when do you think we'll receive the money, we can call that person and they will give us an update. So for each one of these, there is somebody who, we're not just doing it and letting it go. We are updating it, and I've discussed with Amy that we should be looking at this quarterly so that we can keep ahead of anything that we think might become an issue.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
You have a master calendar that pops up with various due dates throughout the year, and that's how.
Yes,
That's
we
how you
do.
keep up with it? Okay.
Yes, and actually, I have to tell you today, I printed it out. It's called the School Business Official Master Calendar. We printed that out, and we will put that into our Google Calendar so that alerts come up to us when things are due. What I like to do is I like to put it at least a week ahead to say, oh, next week this is due, so that we make sure that it's on our radar and we haven't forgotten anything.
Okay. Other questions? All right.
Okay, the next one is the special aid fund, which is our federal funds. Okay. Due to the pandemic,
Reports that didn't go out. Yeah.
yes, due to the pandemic and due to some illnesses in the department that usually does these filings for the FS10, and that is the form that is filed to submit our budget for Title I, Title II, Title III, Title IV, whatever the title funds are, Section 611, Section 619, the CARES money, as I just mentioned. The FS10 is the application that is filed to let the state education department and the federal government know, here is the monies that Greenburgh is due. Here is how we're going to spend that money. Okay. In the process, because we have private schools in our district, we are required to share a portion of that money with them. So that involves speaking with people in their business office to say, here's your allocation. I need you to fill out this paperwork to tell me how you're going to spend it, because we're accountable to how the money that is designated for Greenburgh, whether it be for us or for a private school, how that money is going to be spent, and is it within the guidelines of each title fund. And then once that goes in and is accepted, you can periodically bill for payments. You do not have to wait till the end of a school year to get your money. You can do it quarterly as money is spent. And a lot of times the federal grant money is used on salaries. That helps English language learners, children who need AIS services, things like that. So usually, typically what happens is you file quarterly, because until you get the federal monies in, the general fund has to help the federal funds out. But because of the pandemic and because of an illness, these FS10 final reports for the previous year were not filed. They since have been filed. Amy worked very hard to get these federal grants in. They are in, they have been acknowledged. They are on the website. They are under review, and we have begun to get little payments, but we are going to get the larger payments. It's just they need to review the paperwork that we have filed. In the future, if this were to happen again, because of, again, the pandemic, or if the person doing the paperwork falls ill, we have instituted that the business office could pick this up and do the filings instead of having to wait to see what would happen. That way we will know that we're guaranteed our cash flow and that everything will be done on a timely basis so that the next school year can start and we can do those filings.
Okay. Any other questions on this issue?
No, David.
Yes.
No other questions, at least from me.
Quick question. Is it fair to say that we didn't have a disaster recovery plan in place, which would have kept operations running throughout this process?
Yeah, then I guess that would be fair to say, correct. And since then, since I started in December and I was asked to go over this and come up with a district response, we have put procedures in place so that this will not happen again.
Great.
Okay.
So the next is the reconciliation of interfund activity. So when we receive monies from the state education department, from child nutrition, from any of the state agencies, it is designated to go into one bank account. And then when you reconcile at month end during your bank rec, you just figure out how much has come in for child nutrition, which would be reimbursement for meals, for free and reduced lunches, for milk programs, things like that. Those monies should then be transferred during the month to the fund that it belongs to, which would have been, for my example, the cafeteria fund. That hadn't happened timely in the past. So Amy and I have come up with a way to track these receipts from SED, and that during the bank rec process, those monies will be transferred to the appropriate fund, because that fund in itself has its own expenses instead of sitting in the general fund and then like a lump sum being moved over. So again, we've put processes and procedures in place so that happens monthly. Okay.
So,
Thank-
I'm sorry, I have a question for you regarding that. So in the past, how was it done?
It still was done where it was transferred to the fund that it belonged to. It just wasn't done on a timely basis.
Oh, okay. So what does that mean for accounting? That it looked like you had a surplus in the general fund, but then at the end of the day you didn't? I mean,
Well, it would look like the cash balance in the general fund was larger than it should be, but it really should, some of that money should have gone to the school lunch fund. Yes.
got it. All right, thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. And then the next item is the bank reconciliations. They noted that there were some inaccuracies in the bank recs. So I'm not exactly sure everything that were some inaccuracies, but these inaccuracies or inconsistencies were carried forward consecutive months. So again, Amy and I have gotten together and we've cleaned all of this up. And I explained to Amy, which I know she knew, but just that at the end of the day, the bank rec, your bank balance and your book balance need to come in agreement, whether it be a deposit in transit, outstanding checks, adjusting journal, not adjusting journal entries, but any entries that need to be made to adjust a balance. Everything needs to come. So it's almost like the way I've always done it is you have two sets of books. You have the bank and you have the book. And at the end of the month, that book balance has to match your bank balance after you do all of your adjustments. So we've worked that out and we've come up with a system. I've always used not only the information from our financial software, but I keep what I always call is my cash pad. Okay. And as deposits are made, as warrants are issued, you add and you subtract. That way, that is your book that you actually have written by hand. Anybody who has done those things, because the same person that does the bank rec doesn't do the deposits. The same person who does the bank rec doesn't do the warrants, and that's internal controls. So that, excuse me, you have this cash pad and you have your bank rec, and those two have to agree at the end of the month. And if not, excuse me, then we have to find what the difference or issue is.
I guess what was, this sounds like it predated you. So was there some turnover of staff that was handling this?
Yes, there has been turnover of staff in the business office, yes.
So how long have we been, probably just for me and the other, and Chris, the new people here, how long has this new team been in place?
Well, Amy started in July of this school year, so the beginning of the school year, and I came in December.
Great. And how big is the team?
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 of us.
Thank you.
Okay, the next thing that they wanted
Any other
to,
questions?
oh.
Okay, go ahead.
okay, there were inactive capital projects. So there were 6 capital projects that were still on the books in the capital fund. And during the 1920 school year, there was no activity in these 6 projects. So what the auditor is saying is if there is no activity in these projects and you don't think that they are still open, any funds that are left over should go back to the general fund, and then the board can figure out what to do with that money, whether they want to bring it back to the capital fund for a future project, as the facilities committee is discussing right now. So out of the 6 items that are on this list, 5 have been closed as verified by our Director of Buildings and Grounds. But the 6th one, the mansion roof emergency repairs, things are starting, are in the works. It's with the architects and it's with, I believe, SED. So there
Yes.
hasn't been any actual movement on spending the money to do the repairs because we need to wait for approval and where the facilities committee is going with our projects. So we will
To
make
interrupt
sure.
for just a second, I will say that we submitted our plans for the roof, I think, October 20th. They have recently come back and said that they needed an amendment. I think it was something to do with a shingle nailing pattern to withstand a gust of wind of 110 miles per hour for 3 seconds. And so our architects are trying to come up with something that will, a submission that will satisfy them. And when that happens, then we can go forward with the rest of the process. But that's why that money is sitting there. The other stuff, most of those look like projects I can verify that we've been through, or disasters that we dealt with. We had to replace both boilers at Woodlands High School and have a temporary boiler for a period of time. We had a large water main break that we had a temporary line for a while until we could I believe it went from the high school all the way out to the border of the Warburg campus. And so I think those things, if Mike says that they're taken care of, they're taken care of. Go ahead.
Nope. That's all I have to say about that.
I just had a question. I just want to make sure I understand, Lisa. So everything, in fact, has been spent except for the mansion roof.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And with the boiler line, I guess, is that negative because we didn't have any budget for it and it just happened as an emergency? So then you spend
went
out.
over.
Okay.
Mhm.
Correct. Yes, correct. Yep. So the
Okay.
next is the special purpose. So Greenburgh was fortunate to get a donation from Texaco for our STEAM program. And it says the auditors wanted to cite us on that there is still money left in that donation that hasn't been spent and that it has gone past the year. And in speaking with the high school principal, and because of the pandemic, some of that money has been spent. They plan on spending the remaining $6,499. They're just now trying to decide what to do it on, but that will be spent. And I asked if it will be spent by the end of the school year, and he assured me that it will be. The extra classroom activities fund, that is always a place that the auditors find deficiencies. And that is because the extra classroom activity funds are designed to be run and operated by students with an account advisor to oversee. So the extra classroom activity funds are an entity within itself that is outside of the school district. So they cannot use the school's tax identification number. They have to have their own. They cannot use the school's tax exempt certificate. They are not tax exempt. They have to pay sales tax on their own. Okay. There are clubs that had no financial activity during the school year. And I believe that would be in part that either they're either inactive or because of the pandemic. Okay. And what they're saying is that if there is any inactivity, those clubs should be closed and those funds should go to the student council. And the reason it would go to student council, because the student council encompasses all of the students in a district. Okay. The same with if there's
Wait, one nit. I'm not sure we call it the student council here. Is it like student activities, or it's been a while since high school? Did anybody remember? Is it Lori Luonga's overview of student activities?
I called it the
I don't-
student, I think it's student, well, I called it student council club. I could be wrong.
All right, just check with
Sure.
with Matt Smith, or yeah, okay.
Okay, not a problem. I can do that. I can do that. And then the other thing is that you're trying to teach students how to run a business, how to balance a checkbook, how to do a purchase order, those kind of things, so that they are preparing themselves for the real world and learning how a business operates. There was an instance in one of the clubs where they overspent what was in their club, which obviously is a no-no, and we have to get that cleaned up. And then there was an instance where to withhold state sales tax, the advisor of the whole extra classroom activity created a club, so to say, that they called state sales tax, and you can't do that. So what has to happen is if a club sells Yankee candles and they have to sell, or excuse me, charge sales tax, that has to be accounted for in their records. And then the person who does the reconciliations of all of the clubs, which is a new person in the business office. We've set up a spreadsheet that I brought with me from another school that details the whole account, because it's one bank account, the whole account in total, but then it breaks it down by club. And she knows when sales tax, we pay sales tax once a year. And unfortunately, it wasn't paid on time, and that was because we were closed from the pandemic, but it has since been paid. And we've set up guidelines. Again, like I said, that I brought with me from another school that I had worked in. And what I had done was I kind of created my own handbook that we give to advisors so that they know how to run a club. We even do some seminars to train them. There are online trainings. There are trainings in person, which I'm sending the lady from the business office to, so that she can hear from an outside agency how New York State extracurricular clubs are handled. And then we will make sure monthly, just like our regular bank accounts, that these accounts are reconciled every month. We also, it wasn't written in here, but I will tell you, in speaking with our internal auditor today on the risk assessment, it is a concern that we collect cash. And it's always been an issue in schools that, again, let's use the Yankee Candle example. You could collect a lot of cash for Yankee Candle sales. You could collect a lot of cash for a elementary field trip. What we require is when that happens, if you cannot make a deposit that day, then those funds have to be locked in the school safe, because that is the easiest way for, or if you don't lock it up, for somebody to steal those monies. So in today's world, we are looking into creating a PayPal account, Venmo account, We have my school bucks accounts so that if parents don't want to write a check, they could go online and they could pay the school directly for those trips, those clubs, those fundraisers, and those can all be detailed on those websites. So we're looking into doing something like that so that we're not vulnerable to cash being taken.
If you were to set up an electronic account that way, would it only be for this particular club funds or?
No, we can do this. We can do this for anything. We could do this. I know we do it for school lunch. You can go online and make a payment to your child's school lunch fund so that when they go through the line with their swipe card, their fingerprint, their ID number, whatever, it'll automatically come out of their account instead of them having to bring money or bring a check in. It could also be used for school store, for anything, yearbook, anything like that.
So it sounds like you have to set up one for each specific purpose?
Yes, so like, let's take my school bucks for an example. We would have one my school bucks account, but when you log on with your own special username and password, you can pick the category what you want to pay for.
Okay.
And then that we would print out a report monthly, and we could see, and we would reconcile each one of those fundraising activities to what was collected for the month and then distribute it to those accounts.
Great.
Other comments?
Okay, so the school lunch fund has excess fund balance in it. And the district is aware that there is excess fund balance. This is something that has happened over a couple years. And it is my understanding that the reason that we're keeping fund balance in there is because we know that there will be equipment that needs to be replaced, and we're setting the money aside to use it for those purposes to replace equipment. I can tell you
updated equipment instead of outdated?
Either or. So I can tell you right now, we are in the process of the high school freezer can no longer be repaired. There are parts that can no longer be purchased. The company that comes in to fix it has advised that over the Christmas break, the freezer went down, and it took everything we had to get it fixed, and or look for an avenue where we could store that until it got fixed. But we were lucky enough that they were able to fix it. So we are in the process, which we would use some of this fund balance now to replace that high school freezer.
So
Okay.
David,
Yeah.
I have a quick question about that, because it came up the other day, I can't remember in what context. I thought that we approved $40,000 for a new freezer. So
it's on
we
order.
did.
There were 6 to 8 weeks for delivery,
Yes.
and then it's an external freezer. So it's going to go outside the building, and it has to be on a concrete pad. And unless you want to spend an arm and a leg, you got to wait for it to be a nice warm day like today in order to pour the concrete.
Correct.
So,
So we
right.
are
And then this thing becomes like cold storage, but not a freezer anymore where it is.
Well, what we're going to do is, once the new freezer is installed, we are going to take the old freezer out, and that will give Gary storage.
Right.
Okay. So I just want to understand that the funding for that freezer is coming out of
fund
this.
balance.
So it's not coming out like of an equipment fund or anything. It's coming out of the school lunch fund.
Yes, we're going to pay for it out of the school lunch fund. Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yep, out of the school lunch fund fund balance.
Okay.
Okay. So those were all of the things that we were cited on for control deficiencies. Aside from that, some of the lesser things that they wanted to bring to our attention are our cybersecurity best practices. And as you'll see, they list a whole 10 things here. And today I spoke with our director of technology just to get a better handle on all of these. And I will have to say that Carlos and his team have worked and put together excellent practices for the district. Every year, all staff members have to go through the Global Compliance Network training that is done during a superintendent's conference day, and they have to sign off on it. Carlos has recently this year purchased an InfoSet software that will track all of this for the district so that we make sure everybody is in compliance. Software patches are in place, all devices are updated periodically, and there's no access for personal devices that can get onto our district network. We do have antivirus software in place and installed on all devices and monitored. We have a VPN and that is available, and Carlos and his team will be within the next month they will have it on all of the business office and all of our financial software so that everything is secure, safe and secure as far as all of our bank accounts, getting into our Envision software and into our employee portal, which we are in the process of getting up and running. So no employees' personal information and demographics can be taken. Our password securities are changed every 90 days in the business office. I'm going to say specifically because that's where a lot of our delicate information is. We are prompted every 90 days to change our password. We are prompted every 10 to 15 minutes if our computers are idle that we have to relog back in. That is, so if I am working in our Envision software and I walk away from the desk, it's going to lock itself up and nobody can sit down and get access to the controls that I have. That is all in place. Our information is backed up to servers that we have designated at the school, and then there's a backup at the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center, which is offsite, which is a division of BOCES. So schools have been doing that for a number of years. I'm going to date myself that when I first started doing school business in the late 1990s, the Rondout Valley School District in Ulster County, their central office, which housed the superintendent and the business office, had a fire and they lost everything. They lost all of their records because nothing was backed up. That prompted all other school districts to race to their BOCES and to their regional information centers that you need to help us, or their IT departments, to get a backup that is off-site. And what would happen was, way back then, every night in the district that I worked in, somebody would go downstairs, would back it up on a hard drive, and one of them went home with the treasurer every night. In case something like that happened, our financial software was off-site. We don't have to do that any longer because of the clouds and all of this other computer stuff that goes on. But we do that. I think we do that with our eyes closed. There are policies and procedures in place in the use of technology and safe handling. Like I said, in the beginning of the year, all staff are trained, and the technology department has continual training on cybersecurity and threats. And we do have cybersecurity. We have a umbrella that includes all of our technology and cyber equipment, but on top of that, we have an additional cybersecurity policy with New York State insurance reciprocals that insures the district in case anything should happen.
Good. Questions or comments on this?
I had a question. I just wanted to get back to the school lunch thing. I'm not quite understanding how that was used this year, and if parents are getting credited back for it, or how. I mean, how does the school lunch fund work in COVID?
Well, we're still students are still being charged for meals. We still collect, apply for and collect for free and reduced lunch reimbursement. And we do get those fundings, so those monies do come in. Ever since you went with Aramark, it's a more controlled cost. You know what you're going to spend. You know what you have to pay them. So your overhead cost is just paying for Aramark. You're not paying for labor. You are through them, but for yourselves, you're not paying health insurance, etc. So over time, fund balance, you've made a profit and the fund balance has increased, and those monies are not being reimbursed to anybody, because it's for services and for reimbursements that the school is afforded by the state and the federal government. So those monies are sitting there and they are being used to update each facility. So it's my understanding that, like I said, we're getting the freezer. When I did a tour of the schools with Mr. Falcone, there were like serving lines that had been updated. There were new tables for the students. It's those kind of things that these funds are being used for, to update our facilities.
Okay, maybe I'm just not understanding the school lunch fund. I'm not quite understanding what part of it is paid for by the state for
Okay, so students pay for their lunch. Some students qualify for free or reduced lunch. If you qualify for free or reduced, the state reimburses the district a certain dollar amount, whether it's free or reduced, they're different dollar amounts. And then the state will give you some reimbursement on a paid lunch. So those claims are filed monthly with child nutrition, and then we receive reimbursements through the state for state reimbursement and federal reimbursement. So both agencies supplement schools for their programs.
so those parents who have paid in and who are not eligible for the free and reduced
Do not get a refund. No.
They do not get a refund.
No.
Okay.
Is that eligible to roll to the next school year?
Yeah.
Can you say that again?
Will those funds roll to the next school year?
Yes.
Okay. So, but what if they have like a senior? Then what happens?
Okay, if you have a senior or if you move out of the district, you can call the business office and request a refund, and we will issue you a refund through the cafeteria fund.
Got it. Okay. I understand now. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we're good? All right, so that concludes this document. So now, let's see, we came out of, we were in the management letter. This will take me a minute. We went through all of the boilerplate stuff, the status of the audit. We came to corrective action, and we have now taken care of, there it is, right? This is all the stuff we've been going through. And when we get to the other matters, right, control deficiencies, there's the extra classroom activity fund piece, there's your school lunch fund, there's the cybersecurity practices. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, all of this gets, does our corrective action plan remain as a separate document from this? Or is it
Yes.
Separate, okay.
Yes.
And then all the stuff is on the horizon and they talk about Gatsby statements of the future.
Yes, and what's happening. Well, yeah, what to expect in the future, correct.
What to expect in the future and whether anything has been delayed and because of COVID.
Right.
And right, okay. So does anybody have any questions regarding this? There we go, corrected misstatements. Just a second, it's not over yet. Is there anything that anyone so talk to me about this. What are these items?
These are adjusting journal entries that the auditors made after we closed our books and they came in and audited the funds. These are required to be reported to the public so that they see what it is that they made adjustments to.
Okay, is that 1,300,000? Is that the
Yes, that is the mansion roof.
roof? Okay,
Correct. Mm-hmm. Yep.
okay.
Wait,
Anyone
don't,
have it?
don't go so fast. Wait,
Okay.
hold on.
I'll slow down.
So with this 1.3 million, we were due to receive from the federal and it was reversed?
No, what that that says due from federal aid, due to capital, due from federal aid, due to reclass. Oh, that if you see above it, it says to reclassify transfer booked as a credit. Must have been booked to the federal aid fund instead of the capital fund, and that's just correcting that entry.
Got it.
Okay. Fourth quarter Westchester County sales tax
Mm-hmm.
due from other government non-property. Okay. Special aid fund. State and federal. Interfund transfers.
Right,
Okay,
so every
some of the-
year when we do the ECP program and we
Right.
get state and federal funding for that program, part of the calculation is the rate setting that comes from the state. That is not always timely. So when the auditors came in, they reviewed the calculation and they felt that we needed to make this entry to correct what was already booked.
Okay. Anyone has any questions? Stop me.
I have a general question,
Sure.
actually. So Lisa, if I heard you correctly, you said on this particular section, these things that come in post, I think audit, you said that we then as a board, the board has to make a report to the community on this. Did I hear that correctly?
Well, what happens is that once you approve the audit and you approve the corrective action plan, not only do I have to send it to the state education department, I have to send it to the office of the state comptroller. We have to publish it on our website so that any public can see it. And or if any member of the public would like a copy of it or would like to review it in our office, they are more than welcome to come, and it is on file with the district clerk for anybody to review.
Okay, and all of that information, all of what you said, obviously would be on the website for them to. I guess I just want to make sure the mechanism is in place so
Yes,
that somebody
once you approve this and once the board approves and makes the final approval, which hopefully will be at Tuesday's meeting, then I will send it to Laser and I would ask him to please put it up on our webpage so that anybody can view it.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on what lies before us and under corrected misstatements? Scrolling on. Management representation letter, which I don't believe is.
Dave, could you go
Yeah.
back up for a second? I just want to look at that serial bond thing very quickly.
Yes, that serial bond right there for principal and interest payment, that is not a bond for construction. That was a bond for, it's a very, very old bond that I believe was taken. It was taken for some kind of revenue issue, which has since been completely exhausted. We just made our final payment. So the district right now has no debt service.
Oh, we paid it off. Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
And I recall, I do recall, now that you mention it, I do recall Mary saying something to that effect some time
Yes.
ago. Yeah, okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay. Just to make sure here. Management letter.
This is just a letter from the external auditors telling you what their responsibility is to the district and how they conduct their audit, what GASB, what any gap, all the accounting principles that they have to follow and adhere to.
Information provided, access, communications.
They have a responsibility to detect if they suspect any fraud or anything like that. And
Ways
this
to
letter
review.
here is telling you that they have done their due diligence and looked into everything.
Okay. And I think, so these are the rules they live by. And I think, yes, and it's signed off by the superintendent and the district clerk, treasurer.
Treasurer, correct.
So that, I think, oh, wait a minute. Oh, TRS.
TRS, yeah.
Yeah, okay, they're gonna tell us about themselves. And how,
Right, they
and
tell
there's
you
a
about the
website
firm.
if you're interested in O'Connor Davies. I think there's a parent company that they've been absorbed by. Yeah. And that's it. Okay, so is there anything anybody else needs to go over or in any way that now having seen the management plan and having seen the corrective action plan, is there anything that anybody still has a question about? And if not, do I hear a motion to recommend that the Board of Education adopt the corrective action plan as presented at an upcoming board meeting? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second. I was
All in
trying to find
favor?
my unmute button.
You gotta do that. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Done, unanimous. Okay, that was the primary purpose of this meeting. It's just slightly after 7 p.m., so we're doing well. Okay, and then the last portion of the meeting should be about the internal audit process. Now, back in, I think, February of last year is the last time we talked to our internal auditor. So you have the external auditor or the independent auditor that you know, does everything that is for the public, and then you have the internal auditor who tries to make sure that that our risk is minimized. And so what happened last year? You know, we appointed an internal auditor every year. Well, as needed, and I believe we had an internal audit from last year, and we had received what they felt were things that we needed to look at last year, and they were about to go off and do their deep dive into a particular area that we thought might be high risk, and then we were in the meantime supposed to respond to that, and then COVID hit. And we stopped having committee meetings. And so we're now trying to get processes going again. And we got I think we're now on track for the independent external audit process. And now we've got to get the internal audit process going. So a couple of things need to happen. First, we have a risk assessment for 2020. We need to have a new risk assessment for 2021. That process needs to start, and we need to find out what happened to our deep dive last time. But I suspect that ship has sailed.
Nope, I've got an update on that.
Tobin? Lisa, have you talked to John Tobin?
Yes, I have. Yes, I
and
have.
What did you find out?
Okay, so the responses to the June 30th, 2020 risk assessment I went through everything that was listed as observations and recommendations
Mhm.
in his report. And as far as extra classroom activities is concerned, again, we will continue to use the financial software that the business office uses for the
Okay.
general fund.
Let me stop you. We got to provide a little context. So I'm gonna speed through the base document, and then you have a list of responses, and you're going to go over that list of responses. So we need some context so that people know what's happening in case they haven't seen this particular document in the past. So okay, so this is the assessment for this is last year's risk assessment report. Okay, and so we go through, and you have the cover letter, and you know what they have pretty much done, how they proceed, and you get to about page
So,
6.
David, let me stop you there for a minute. So what John Tobin and his firm do is they come in and they interview key personnel. Okay, and here's the list of key personnel that they interviewed in the 2019-2020 school year, okay, which is what this risk assessment is basically based on, okay? He notes what he did during the engagement. He notes in here things that have improved from the previous school year, and then he will comment on his recommendations, his observations, and how high of a risk assessment each category or each division poses to the school district.
And here's how he calculates the relative risk of various categories. And then here.
So right here, these are the areas that he reviewed, and he rated them from 0 to 100. He classifies everything here as being medium for the most part, except for information technology. He rates that risk as being high, and that is mainly because of the world we live in, the cyber world, the phishing schemes, things like that. And what he wants to make sure, just like the external auditor, that Carlos and his team have things in place that will stop things before they even reach our servers or our network.
Mm-hmm. And we had in previous years gone over information technology as our deep dive area, and the recommendation at that point was to go for government aid grants for the deep dive for that year. And did he actually do some research on that, or has that happened yet?
Okay, so what has happened is he has already come in for the 2020-2021 school year, and he has reviewed all of these areas once again. He has interviewed everyone from myself all the way down in every one of these areas. He is in the process of writing the report that will be similar, looks just like this. He and I went over some of those issues today. He is going to finalize that report. Due to the pandemic, and because when that started in March, he wasn't able to begin the federal government aid and grant deep dive, but he is still planning on doing that. He is reaching out to Dr. Reynolds so that he can come in and meet with him, because Dr. Reynolds is the administrator of the federal grants. He will interview Kimberly Johnson, who is the grant coordinator, and he will meet with Amy and myself, since Amy and I have helped to finalize some of the FS10s, and we have helped to write some of the new grants. So he plans on starting that within the next month so that he can do this deep dive for the board as he had promised in his previous findings. He did say these areas of review down here that do not have a date listed. The grants, aid, and fiscal operations will have a date, because he will be doing that within this school year and have a report for the board on his findings. And then he asked that we discuss where you would like the next area of review be. And he and I discussed what he thought would be a pertinent area. And I said that I thought that payroll, human resources, and benefits should all be lumped into one, since that is the largest expense in any school district. And even though I know that we have excellent processes in place, he praised all three of those departments in the business office, especially payroll and benefits. Our two ladies that are heading up those departments are doing a phenomenal job. The benefits person has brought that from 0 to 100 I mean, I've only been there for 2 months, but just listening to her speak with employees, guide employees, the work that she's done, the spreadsheets that she's produced, and the way she handles and helps retirees is absolutely phenomenal. But having said that, you never know what is out there that other school districts are doing that we could institute, that we might not be thinking of. And it's always good for somebody with an outside set of eyes to come in and see how we do things, what our procedures are. I let him know that since I have started, I've been working with Carlos and his team, that we are going to expand on our financial software, which is called Envision. And we're going to get a subsect of that called Optigate. Optigate is an employee portal where we will not be distributing employee pay stubs via mail, interoffice mail, and/or on emails, because those are susceptible for somebody to get your personal information. Optigate is an employee portal that will be completely secure and encrypted with your personal information. You'll be able to get your pay stub, your W-2. You'll be able to change your demographics. You'll be able to look up anything that is pertinent to you and your personal information on this portal, and either speak with benefits, human resources, and/or payroll to update your information, and no one else will be able to get that. That should be up and running, I would say, within the next couple months, which will be a very good thing for everybody involved. So.
Okay, Tanya?
So Lisa, you just threw like so much information at us. But so I'm going to ask you to toggle back to the beginning of what you said, which was that you are recommending that we lump together benefits.
Yes, I believe that benefits, human resources, and payroll all tie in together.
And
Instead,
so what do you mean? Like that you're going to create like a separate code for them, or you're going to like, what exactly does that mean?
When Mr. Tobin and his team come in and they concentrate on just these areas, because they all tie into one another. So instead of, let's say I'm just going to give you an example. Instead of in the 2020-2021 year doing benefits, and then in the 21-22 year doing HR and payroll, lump them all together into one, because they all tie in together. And let's do one risk assessment on all of that to make sure what HR is putting in, say for a new employee, is flowing through the correct way to payroll and to benefits, instead of doing them separately.
Michael, I'd like to sort of hear your thoughts on this.
On lumping them together?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like, Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but the lumping together is just for audit purposes, not any like chart of accounts change.
Yeah. Oh, yes. No. It's just being, okay. Tanya, I'm just lumping them together as one audit item. I'm not lumping the departments together. No.
Okay,
this is just for audit purposes. Just for audit purposes.
So that sounds like a big plus from an efficiency standpoint, because you're kind of getting, I mean, when you relate them together, you're kind of getting that audit of multiple items down to one. They are highly interrelated, so they should be considered together. I mean, as you know, the benefits is all run through payroll as an HR function, so it makes a lot of sense to put that together.
Okay.
Sounds
I
good
got
to me too. Chris, what do you
All right,
think?
Yeah, I would agree as well. Especially if there's, you know, some risk that you're finding in one that would be in the other, and then you're not going to catch it because you're not doing the deep dive until the next year, right? So it's
Right, correct.
efficiency
Yes.
and the risk.
Take forever to fill the chart out.
Correct.
Okay, so do I hear a motion to that our recommendation for the next deep dive is the combination of payroll, HR, and benefits?
Great,
Hey,
David.
hey, Dave,
Yeah, sure,
one,
yeah.
one question before you go there. Lisa, at the start, you mentioned that that Tobin and Associates cited this area as an area where we perform very well. I forget your exact words, but that, you know, didn't raise any flags. And your point is well taken that, you know, it's always good to look at what other people do because, you know, it's a fresh set of eyes and also because of the size of this. But I'm just wondering, is there an area that might be more problematic that deserves our attention? I don't want to, I mean, if we're doing things right, I just don't want it to occur at the expense of where we might be a little shaky. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, I do. If we weren't going to do that, then I would either say purchasing and payables and or facilities and operations. The reason, as I said in the beginning, that I picked HR, payroll, and benefits to do all together, one, I think they all link in together, and that is the largest expenditure of the district.
Right. Okay.
Again, I don't think that anything is being done wrong. I just think that having a fresher set of eyes is always a good thing, to make sure we're doing things correctly, because as I'm sure Michael and Chris will know, that it doesn't just involve payroll. It involves all your benefits. It involves all your HR information. It involves retirees. It involves Medicare reimbursement to retirees. It digs a little deeper. But if you didn't want to do that, which is completely up to the committee, then I would either pick purchasing and payables or facilities and operations.
No, I was just throwing that out because, you know, it stuck with me that you said, you know, the kind of laudatory stuff, but because of the size of it. Well, before you do that, so let me just ask you this, and maybe this will make me feel a little bit more comfortable. If you could if you could just spend a little bit of time as to why you would recommend purchasing and payables, and what was the other one?
Building and grounds.
Buildings and grounds. Well,
Yeah.
right. So purchasing and payables, we want to make sure that we're adhering to our purchasing policy. We want to make sure that we're doing bidding correctly. We want to make sure we're doing bidding, that we're using bidders, and that that everything is being checked correctly by our internal claims auditor, which is the lady that comes in before the warrant is released, to make sure that everything is, okay to pay, that what we're asking to be paid is. And again, he complimented her and he complimented the accounts payable staff for the job that they are doing.
Right.
I can tell you that one of the things that he recommended, even though extra classroom activities and Greenburgh Central School District are two different entities, so to say, because they each have their own ID number, and extra classroom cannot piggyback off of Greenburgh, they still should be using the vendors that we have approved and we have verified to make no mistake that they're using like a fraudulent company, or they're not getting the goods that are received. Okay. So again, all of these is just to make sure that the procedures that we have in place are proper, that we're following the policies as established by the Board of Education, and just to make sure that everybody is being held accountable. As far as facilities and operations is concerned, I've been working the last 2 months with Mr. Falcone to get some procedures in place, some accountability, some written standards for our own information, for our own verifying of things. We've started logs. I want to know, when a vehicle is taken in the morning, here's the mileage. Does that mileage match the mileage the night before? Those kind of things. I think it's important if you were to do facilities and operations, because we have so many buildings and we don't have a central shipping and receiving, that it's important to have everybody accountable for the supplies that are in their building. What is your beginning inventory? What have you received? What have you distributed? Do you know where it was distributed? Those kind of things, and compare it possibly with the year before. How many cases of paper towels did you buy in 1920 versus what did you buy in 2021? To see if there are any discrepancies so that we hold people accountable. It is my goal to recommend to the facilities committee that eventually, somehow, somewhere, we we either convert a building if it's not being used, or we construct a building that would be central shipping and receiving, so we could control what we are buying more in a central location, so that we have all the pertinent information that we need and that we know who is getting what. So there's somebody like a storekeeper.
Right. So, thank you for that, Lisa. That's very interesting. And I'm inclined, I'll go with what the majority wants to recommend, but I just have my feeling is, if we are strong in human payroll, those three areas you mentioned earlier, and again, I certainly agree with the need to always, be looking and looking at, other best practices. But it almost sounds to me, just from listening to to Lisa, that the other areas, facilities and purchasing and payables, are probably not as far along as the first area. And my thinking is, perhaps we want to address that now, and then at a later point come back and look at the other area. I mean, that I'm just throwing that out as a thought. Again, if you all want to go with the initial.
Well, I would say, Terry, if you're going to pick a second area, I would go with facilities and operations. And let me just tell you why. Mm-hmm. In payroll, HR, and benefits, and in purchasing and payables, I am a firm believer on too deep. And what I call too deep is if the payroll lady is doing payroll and she finishes payroll, she takes that payroll and she hands it off to person B. Mm-hmm. They review what she has done. They review what she has input. They review what she's input for overtime, for any substitutes, et cetera, because we're all human and we all make mistakes. Right. And it's for that. It's to catch any mistakes, but it's also for accountability, that if David did 10 hours of overtime this week, she's not paying him for 100. Okay. So right. We do have those processes in place in the business office that, and I do that, one, to protect all of us, to protect myself and to protect my employees, just to make sure that nothing, the worst thing, and I've always said, is to go back to somebody to tell them that they owe you money through their payroll because of an error that has been made, and or to catch anything, God forbid somebody is going to, try to scam you or right. something like that. So we do have those processes in place. So if you wanted to put that off and do something else, then I understand.
Why would we have to put anything off? I mean, why can't we just, have best practices for every single category?
Well, because that is a very good question, Tanya. What these areas of review are is what David called the deep dive.
Right.
Okay, so he
Gotta
comes
do a little bit of everything, but the deep dive is in addition to that.
exactly. He picks an area and he really analyzes it. Okay, to do all of these, I'm not going to say that he would say no, but it would cost us, and we have to try to stay within what we've budgeted for the school year.
So
Like 18.5.
how many do we get to pick?
Well, it
Usually,
looks like
well,
she managed to
yeah, well, I managed
shoehorn
to
a couple of
take,
categories in together.
yeah, and I gotta tell you, Mr. Tobin did agree with me about combining the HR, payroll, and benefits, and I don't think that we would get charged any more for that.
Okay.
But I don't know, I don't know how many he would do or what the cost would be. I'd have to ask him that.
What's going through my mind right now, the thing that's not making me move towards, say, building and grounds that's a higher risk category is there's a pie chart in my head that says that 3/4 of our budget is salary and benefits. So I'm saying, yes, if I need to fill in some blanks here and somebody comes back and looks at this later and says, well, why didn't you fill in the blank for the salaries? I won't be able to have, I won't have a good reason to say why I didn't. So I would probably do that first. And then a year from now, I would come back and go after buildings and grounds. That's my 2 bits. What do other people think? I'm just one guy.
Well, one question is, if we do buildings and grounds, and we're looking to get potentially this, new building secured, would it be beneficial to us that we've already went through the review and identified the risk areas as a kind of negotiation point to get the next building? So there might be some benefit to the buildings and grounds. If it's already high risk, we could identify those key things now up front and be better educated as to how we can, get it over the hump.
True.
Okay. So we got a couple people leaning towards buildings and grounds. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with you on what's the biggest dollar risk, right? And that's where, I think we should spend the time.
Okay. So we're kind of 2 and 2. So Tanya, what do you think?
Oh my gosh.
No pressure.
I want to do both. I want to do both. I mean, Lisa, is it going to cost extra? Like if we do both, because those are like 2 big categories. So I would do both if we can.
Okay, I can go back to Mr. Tobin and ask him. Actually, I think we will be speaking with him again tomorrow, so I could ask him.
Because the rest of it is kind of peanuts, I guess, compared to these 2. So, I mean, these are you know what I'm saying? I mean, if you're looking just at the dollar amounts, these are the 2 biggest categories. So I would go with those if we can get those 2 done.
If we had to decompose that lump of 3 categories into 1 category plus building and grounds, which one would you pick?
I would go with Lisa's and Michael's and Chris's recommendations on this one. I think that.
Okay.
So.
Okay, so you will renegotiate, and we're leaning towards, we want to include building and grounds.
And grounds.
So go
Okay.
do that and see what we come back with.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
When do we have to know by? Like, when do we have to get him started?
Well, right now he's finishing the general, or he has finished the general one for all these areas of review, and he's going to come back in this school year and do the grants, aid, and the deep dive into grants and aid and fiscal operations. So what we're discussing wouldn't be until next school year.
Got it.
Okay. So then, in terms of scheduling, we're going to look and make sure that we've responded to everything from last year, and that's the last thing we do before we close down this meeting. But prior to that, he's going to come back with a risk assessment for this year.
Yes.
How far out are we? When do we need to schedule our next meeting, basically?
Let's see, we're at the end of February. I would say at sometime in April, maybe end of April.
Okay. End of April, next meeting. All right. And we'll come out with some dates and see what he can do.
Okay.
All right.
I have a question.
Yes.
David, was there anything else on the agenda? I'm sorry, because I wanted to ask this just as a footnote before we adjourn, but did you have?
Basically, what I want to do now is we have last year's report, and we have Lisa's going to give her responses to last year's report. So I'm going to scroll down to the things that he found last year and make sure that we're not, paying for this report and then not addressing the problems he finds. So,
Okay.
It's another round of kind of what we just did with the independent audit. And when we come out of that, then we'll be at the end. Okay, so let me start scrolling.
So maybe I should just ask my quick question now because it
Oh,
harks back.
Go ahead.
So Lisa, I'm sorry to go back to the school lunches, but it's just that a parent sent an email and I just want to clear this up. So her question is, are the funds that families paid into My School Bucks and thus to GCSD Lunch Fund Me the same funds that were discussed tonight to pay for the freezer and
No.
other building upgrades?
No.
No, okay.
No.
So then she asks, if so, when will this be explained? Okay, so I guess you're explaining it now. So they're completely separate. So My School Bucks is, well, I'm familiar with this program.
Okay. My School Bucks is an avenue just like it's similar to PayPal,
Right.
but it's for schools where parents can pay or parents can add money to their students' lunch account. And it's used throughout the year until it's exhausted and can be replenished. At year end, if there is still money left over, it stays on account for the next year when the student comes back. If they move or the student graduates, then we will issue a refund.
Okay, so the 40,000 for the freezer, for example, is that something that we put into our school lunches or like?
No,
Where
that's
does that money come from?
that's the profit that
That's
we
the
have
profit.
accumulated.
Okay,
That's the profit we've accumulated.
all right. Thank you so much. Okay,
You're
sorry,
welcome.
David, go ahead.
Okay, so for the extra classroom activities, this was the one that had 4 observations. And as I told you before, the district moved to using the Envision, which is the accounting software that we use to track all activities. We still, to date, do things through Envision, but we also do things on an Excel spreadsheet, and we cut checks manually. We are going to transition over where checks will be cut through the program like it should be. So that is just something that we need to institute and we need to get used to. And as I told you before, even though Extra Classroom is a different entity from Greenburgh Central School District, the advisors and students should be looking at our vendor list that has been approved and that have been verified, or people that we have used through bidding processes who we know are viable vendors, instead of them trying to use somebody that could be risky or be a fraudulent vendor. So we are going to encourage that. And again, all students will be encouraged to pay by check or through a PayPal, Venmo, My School Bucks, something like that. And if we need to set something up just for extra classroom activities, which I would think that we would, since it's a separate entity, we will do that and make it and publicize it and make it well known that people can pay through that portal. And then we're going to adopt or create a uniform procedure manual and provide training to anybody. I'm going to get the lady in the business office and the person in the high school, middle school, high school that runs the extra classroom activities. We're going to get them training through a state agency, and then they will give trainings to any new advisors and or updates to any new advisors so that everybody's doing things properly. Quarterly, they will collect a profit and loss statement, because every club that conducts a fundraiser, conducts a event where they collect money, the students have to do a profit and loss statement, and that is required to be kept on file. So we will be teaching those students and advisors how to do that work. Then in buildings and grounds.
Okay, this is the response sheet, which contains all of the things that Lisa is saying. And so I'm going to be skipping back and forth between the two so that the responses make sense and you can understand what she's doing. So the things she's just said are items 1 through 4 right here. And we're about to go on to buildings and grounds.
Okay. It was recommended by Mr. Tobin and his associates that the district have a vehicle acceptable use policy, which we do not have, and we still currently do not have. So I contacted our district clerk and asked her if she could please contact our policy company, which is Erie One BOCES, to get a sample of a vehicle acceptable use policy. They have sent me 4 samples, and I'm going to take those 4 samples and I'm going to combine them into one. I'll send that to our attorney to review. And once Carol has done any corrections or additions or whatever she feels, excuse me, then I'll present it to Dr. Chase to present to you as a Board of Education to adopt as a policy so that we have something in writing and in our policy manual.
So then all of the things that people are now doing that they weren't doing before with all the logs, you're going to make sure that's
I'm going to make sure,
not just because the current staff is doing it.
yes,
It's always going to be here. Okay.
yes, I'm going to make sure that is happening. I'm going to make sure that we have copies of people's licenses on file. We're going to make sure that everybody knows, and whoever is assigned a vehicle or who could use a vehicle knows that is not to be used for personal use. We will not be lending out a vehicle, on a weekend unless it is board approved, like say, I would say like maybe Westchester County government or something, if they needed that. I'm just throwing that out. It's not going to be Mr. Jones down the road that needs a dump truck. That, it's all those kind of things that we'll make sure are in this policy so everybody knows what is acceptable.
Yes.
Okay. And the other thing was that he recommended that we have a vestibule at the high school, and currently that is at the state education department. So that is in the works.
Okay. And see, district is currently working with the Architects NYSE AD to create a secure vestibule at Woodlands Middle High School. And I believe that was option 2, and there were some tweaks being made to that. And I think the architects are making the changes. I have not seen the revised rendering.
No, neither
Okay.
have I. So the next one was when Mr. Tobin and his associates came in, they were not able to access their software through their laptops, through our network to their office. And I'm assuming that that was a little frustrating, but after speaking with Carlos Ramirez, the director of technology, that is not something that is uncommon in a school. Someone cannot just come in with their laptop, with their phone, with their iPad or their tablet and access our network and get to the outside to access something else, because that could compromise our information and our network. Whenever somebody is coming in, and I believe that people in the business office weren't, I think they were aware of it, but it wasn't first and foremost on their mind. So when Mr. Tobin comes in again to do his deep dive, we will let Carlos know that he is coming in and he may need to access his files in his office, and Carlos will set up something where he will be able to get out securely to get that information. But then once he's done, that will be closed and he won't be able to do it again. So that was, I think, just a logistic thing.
Okay. And I'm one of the reasons that I didn't go after technology, even though it was labeled as high risk, as my next deep dive category, other than the fact that other people have already looked at it, is I think they have looked at it to a certain extent, and they're just frustrated about being able to use their laptop in a particular office, and that's why we're still sitting at 78. That's what I think. Okay. But
Yep. And I have to just say as a sidebar, I think Carlos, Laser, Diego, Neil, everybody in Carlos's department, they are ahead of the curve and they are on top of things, and things are very secure and safe. I believe that it got a rating of 78, like I said previously, only because of what is happening in the world today and how people are trying to get our information.
okay.
Okay, the next is HR and payroll. Like I said before, he recommended that we do an employee portal, and we are doing that. We actually have had meetings. We've run through the software. They've shown us how it works, and we are working with the Lower Hudson Regional Information Center to get Greenburgh up and running for our own online employee portal, so everybody's information will be safe.
So you've actually purchased the software, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's a division of Envision, which is our financial software.
Okay.
Yeah, not to belabor the point, but I think that that's probably why I'm leaning towards building and grounds if we had to choose, because we're making the improvements already on the HR side. Definitely get that point that it's the largest, but it's already being addressed with some corrective measures where we're not making the adjustments on a higher risk category.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Correct. Yep.
Okay. So now human resources and payroll.
That we just did that one.
Yeah. Okay. Now, not everything has a finding. Let's see.
Right.
Current assessment.
Yeah. The last one is government aids and grants,
There we
and
go.
they his feeling for government aids and grants is that everything should be in one centralized location with one person. And I believe what he means there is that even though Dr. Reynolds is in charge of the federal grants, the ECP grant is done by a separate person outside of his office, because that is a huge, huge grant. And that was the pride of the previous treasurer, and she was very good at it, and she knew it deep down. I mean, she really did her research, and her knowledge on that is outstanding, and she has been helping Amy and I to understand it more. But he felt that everything should be in one location. So it is my understanding and my philosophy that I don't want to write the grants, because I'm not a curriculum and instruction person, and I don't know who would need Title I services, Title II, Title III. I would leave that to Dr. Reynolds. But when it comes to the funding and requesting quarterly payments, I believe that needs to be done in the business office and in conjunction with the business office. Because a lot of times what I see in schools is once the grants are written, people are like, okay, I'm done. No, you're not. No, we are not done, because we have to file for the payment. So even though they may be housed in curriculum and instruction, I think somebody in the business office working together with them to make sure we get the funds on a timely basis needs to be done.
Okay. I agree. At this point, I think that's the last set. Am I correct? That's the last set of observations?
That's the last. And then just the rest of this is Mr. Tobin has given flow charts.
Flow charts on all the basic processes, which we can use as a reference, and people can look at their leisure, since you all have access to this. So that's revenues and receivables, payroll. There's the payroll, right? And food service. Okay. So does anyone have any questions regarding this report? I think we have our to-do list. We don't have to have a formal recommendation for adoption as we would if it were an external audit piece. So the next responsibility would be to report this to the board, and we will forward it on along with our to-do list. And I think that takes care of it. And we're done with our agenda. Does anybody have anything else they wish to bring up?
I
Dave,
have a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Terry.
Terry?
Dave, one question. The external auditor also, does that firm also pick an area of our operations to evaluate at our request?
No.
No.
The external audit is to evaluate the books for the previous school year, the school year that will have just ended as of June 30th. And an external audit is done on samples. They don't evaluate every transaction. They do random samples. So for example, when they test payroll, they do it on a random sample. There's a program where they'll put in the beginning check, the ending check, and then that will spit out random numbers, and they will evaluate every facet of that person's check for that payroll period. And it does the same thing with accounts payable and other areas. It's like an overall sample of what has happened through the year to see if they can randomly catch something. Unless, you know, as a board, you get a letter from them in the summer that asks if there's anything that you would like to bring to their attention, and/or is there anything that you would like them to look into if you feel that there is something that is being misrepresented or awry.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, Tanya?
So, Lisa, I'm thinking back to our finance committee meeting, and I know that you brought up some issues about the way that the money was distributed amongst the different funds and the fact that we don't have a capital reserve fund and all of that. So I'm just wondering how it's all going to tie into this as we clean up these various drawers, so to speak.
Since our last meeting on Monday, I have begun to do my own deeper dive into the capital funds. Okay. I know that there were a lot of questions. I know that it's not something that is common to everybody that was on the committee or that was sitting there, and I understand that. So I am going to try to create a spreadsheet for all of you on the committee to see. I'm going to do Excel this time, in an Excel spreadsheet that's going to list the projects, and I'm going to tell you where, when, what is left, and what our attorneys and or our auditors say we need to do with it. So that once we are all done and we add up the bottom line, that is the number that needs to be in the capital fund. And here's why. That way we will have a detailed accounting. Everything will have been reconciled so that, for lack of a better, let's say March 1st, we know here's what we got, here's what we have to do. Now we can go from there.
Got it. Okay. Well, I really look forward to that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else?
Just quickly, Dave. Mike and Chris, are you guys still with us? You don't want to quit yet?
So this is all familiar, so.
Okay.
Thank you for joining our committee. Your expertise is valued. All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Sorry.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Good
Good evening.
night. Good night.
Bye.
Good night. 6:50 p.m.